Have you ever thought about writing a children's book? Stay tuned. We're going to talk to Simon and hear all about it. And if you haven't thought about writing a children's book, stay tuned and listen to what Simon has to say. It's going to be a great episode. Can you let our audience know who you are and what you do?
My name is Simon Dorey. I am trying to carve out a career in children's books, writing children's books. I live in North Vancouver in British Columbia. I've lived here since 1986, apart from 3 years in Calgary, and a completely different career. And I've been telling stories to my children. Started when my eldest was about 5. And I started telling the stories primarily because some of the books we were reading we didn't think were that good, or I felt I could do something better. And also to write stories that were personalized to her and incorporated. And I sort of have my second sort of family, my twins, and I continue telling the stories to them and about them or making up different ones. And part of it was, of course, when you're telling an audio story, you're describing everything. And then when I began to write picture books, you realize you have to take out a lot of the description and let the illustration show that. So that was a real challenge for me.
Mm.
And so you also have, but when I write, I have an idea of what the illustration will have in it, so I can at least write to that illustration. But if the illustration
Okay.
changes, then of course you need to change the story, which sometimes is a lot easier to change the story than it is to change the illustration. So
Okay.
so that's how I began, and
Love it.
didn't really progress very much because it was very apparent that the cost of producing physical books, picture books, is very high.
Yes.
And you have to have either you need to have a publisher do it, or you've got to have significant amount of cash to be able to produce. To get a picture book down to a reasonable cost for the buyer, you've got to have a fairly significant print run, which can $10,000-$20,000 per book easily. And
Wow.
also, I attended a course given by a local publisher of children's books, and he was kind of put a downer on the whole thing because his comment was, we publish 12 books a year, and the only reason we can publish 12 books a year is because the federal government help gives us grants to do that. So your
Wow.
chances of getting published as a children's book is very slim.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of put everything on the back burner. And then, of course, what came along was ebooks
Yes.
and the whole digitization and process. And I helped start a company that was doing pretty much exactly the same thing as I'm doing now back in 2008. And we were trying to set up a company that anybody can sell their books through. And
Mm-hmm.
we probably were a little bit ahead of the curve at that time in terms of
Okay.
ebooks. And then, of course, what the other thing that we didn't really, even though we're trying to make the books available for free and give people, the option of donating towards them, the problem is that doesn't really work. And you also don't have money you need extra money then to do the marketing. So you've got to have a lot of
Right.
money to get all your SEO marketing and all that kind of stuff on the internet. And we didn't succeed with that. But I've kept the idea a lot. And so when I decided to do my book publishing, so I then, through COVID, the government here gave up a few grants to help people keep their businesses or develop new businesses that were taking advantage of the internet.
Right.
So I was able to get some grants to help me set up my websites
Oh, good.
and to get these initial books published, edited and illustrated and published. And that's worked quite well. So that helped we basically got going at the end of 2022 and have been trying to market it with different levels of success since. And then I decided also that I didn't want to do my book marketing promotion through Amazon. I felt that they make a lot of money and they've got a million authors on Amazon. Amazon do a great job, don't get me wrong. I buy a lot of books
Right.
through Amazon. And I wanted to do SEP, so I felt that a different way of promoting the books would be to work in tandem with the fundraising organizations of schools. and so PTAs, PACs are called up here, and so that in return for the schools promoting it, they would get the commission that otherwise would have gone to Amazon. The school gets the commission, and that way they do it as a fundraiser, and that way hopefully it's a win-win, because they're targeting the parents you're trying to reach are they're the parents whose kids go to school, because I'm
Right.
doing picture books, not anything older at the moment, and
Right.
and so if they have a vested interest in promoting your books, they will help do that, and of course you then got an audience that changes every year. And hopefully that will be a win-win situation. So that's how I got into the whole book publishing side of things, or promotion side of things. And
Got it.
that's a lot of work is involved in promoting it. So,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Right. Marketing anything is just, that's why they have business. That's why people are making money running businesses, marketing for other people, because it is so time consuming, especially if you think about the learning curve. The learning curve takes a lot of time, and then the actual implementation takes a lot of time.
right.
So it's a lot. Okay. So you started actually doing books for yourself, publishing them in
Yes.
22. Is that right?
Yeah, I basically got everything done by the end of 22. Because,
Okay.
and have been working trying to promote that locally through schools that my kids attended,
That's a
friends
good
that
idea.
kids attended, with not perhaps as much success as I'd like to have had. But that's a lot of it is just, you've got to keep top of mind. You have to keep plugging away and finding a way that attracts different people.
I
And
like it.
perhaps hitting the timing and things. So right now we've got a big push going on. I finally decided I really wasn't going to be able to do the social media stuff. I hired someone to do that. So we've now got better, more continuous web presence to support what we're doing. And now it's just a push of contacting people directly, locally, and through Alignable and other networking facilities. So to reach people in different parts of the world.
So, how many books have you written to this point? Children's books.
At this point, I've probably written in some degree of completion, probably about 100. However,
Wow.
at the moment, only I've got five. Five are now being published through the website, which is called littlepicturebooks.com, and I've also got Spanish and French translations for those. And we're just
Wow. I
about to
love that.
add coloring books as well. That's in the process. The next couple of weeks, we'll be adding coloring
Ah.
books, because lots of people like to color, and of course, picture books lend themselves to coloring. And then I've got about I think I've got five in the different stages of editing / post editing, about to be illustrated, and now started on a series being edited last year, and that's taken a while to get through. It's I had one book which was talking about a child through divorce, dealing with
Mm.
post separation. That was based on my experience, and that was just taken a long time to
Mm.
complete that. It's quite an emotional subject, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. It definitely is. I have been divorced, and so we're actually a blended family. So, yeah, I know that it's very emotional for the adult and for the children. So I love that you've put together something for the kids. That's just
Yes.
brilliant.
Yeah, it's trying to help a child adapt to the separation,
Yeah,
and it all started
it's
off because of
huge.
something my son said when he was 5, and it was a very impactful statement, and I'm trying to craft a story that ends with that and leaves the readers trying to, this is what a child feels like, a 5-year-old feels like,
Wow.
or part of what they feel like. And so, yeah, so that's taken a while. So it took a lot. So that's kind of impeded book production the last while. But
Okay.
yeah, but of course, with picture books, you have to get them illustrated. If you don't illustrate your own, then that takes time and more money. For people to
Hmm.
illustrate their own books, it's a lot simpler process. Um,
So, since we are Communicate Great and we're about communication, and I wanted you to come on, I asked you to come on because
yeah,
you write children's books, which is storytelling.
yes, it
And
is.
storytelling, obviously, is communication, right? You're communicating a message. So when the last time you and I talked, I said, "Well, how do you come up with your stories? What do what's your process?" And so I'm going to throw this out for you to answer for the audience because you answered me. And so how do you come up with your story ideas? How do you develop the storyline? How do you tell the story?
Right. Well, the ideas typically come from something that's happened in real life. So, example was obviously going through divorce and the kids' reaction to that. So that led to a story. It could be something as mundane as my children's smelly feet, which has led to my book called Cheese Feet, which is on the site. And how what you do with that? How do you make that something really funny? And I thought it was great when I sort of that particular book. I thought, oh, great, this is easy to write. And I sat down, wrote this, and thought that's not very funny. There's not. It should be a lot funnier than that. So I had to really rewrite it, and then you have to imagine a lot more what the pictures could look like, and
Mm.
what that also I like to, if possible, if the topic leads to, for example, something that has some factual base, such as cheese. And so through the cheese feet, we actually end up taking the very smelly feet and using that. This character comes along, Monsieur Fromage, and he makes very smelly cheese from it. And I like very smelly cheese. So we've got brie, and we have, because my son's called, his name is Aubrey, so brie cheese, and then my daughter's name is Danica, so we came up with Danisher for Danisher Blue, Danish blue cheese, which is smelly. So, and then from that, so at the end of the book, I then have a little paragraph about how brie cheese is made and Danish blue is made, so that people have a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of factual understanding from it, and they can see why the story flows into that. It doesn't
Oh, that's
translate.
great.
It doesn't translate quite when you're using Spanish or French, because you're playing on words as well. So that's
Right.
something that I really hadn't thought about when getting things translated. But these actually is a pun on the English word, not necessarily on what the word is in French or Spanish. So
That's great.
yeah, so that came out for that's how I typically look at stories. I think my whole series I'm now working on all came about from trying to encourage my daughter to eat fruits and vegetables, and it all sort of came from that. So that's a whole new
Okay.
series that we're working on. And what else have I got? I've got the other major character now developing is called the Little Picture Book, and he goes on this journey to achieve his dream of being published. And the whole concept of Little Picture Book all came about because when I started doing this with this company back in 2008, we were suddenly finding ourselves trying to compete with people like Google and for example, what we were trying to do is, as well as having new books, we were bringing on classics that were out of copyright. And Bodleian
Mm.
Library in Oxford has a copy of every single book that was ever published in the UK since 500 years now. And so they had a very famous children's collection called the Opie Collection, and I went to them and said, "Look, could we possibly, use your, pay you some money or whatever it is to use your books and have them published on our website?" And they say basically, we'd love to help you, but Google is digitizing every single one of our books.
Oh, wow.
So then you realize how do you as a startup company compete with the big people like
Google.
Google? And I'm not saying they're trying to stifle the market; they're just paying to have the exclusive rights to this to be able to digitize. So they're digitizing everything, which is a fantastic task and a fantastic job. So I came up with the concept of the little picture book against the big picture books, being the big corporations. So,
I love it.
but
I love it.
but part of that process is communicating. So he goes through all these different struggles to get published, and it's like following your dream. And if you look
I
at the
love it.
book, we have a reference. I paraphrase or adapt the the poem that is on the by the Statue of Liberty that's welcoming immigrants to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and then I paraphrase that to sort of here we have electronic and self-publishing welcoming all these books that are otherwise not to be published because the publishers could not accommodate them, welcome them to be published and to be heard throughout the world, which is what self-publishing
Wow.
does, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what ebook publishing, because it's so much cheaper than doing the physical book, has allowed
Mm-hmm.
people to do. You know, it's the same thing
Mm-hmm.
as in music. All the independent, because the cost of the ability to record music now and do what we're doing here in a studio is so much easier now than it is to book recording time. You have a huge number of independent labels come up and a tremendous amount of more music that is
Right.
being recorded and produced and published and sold than ever was before that kind of technology allowed it. So that's good. So to go back to your original question, yes, that's how I with storylines. And sometimes it's, for example, I had a picture, I came across it, and this is quite funny. My daughter decided she was going to put, when she was like 3, put underwear on her head and then underwear on my head. And so we got this picture, and I came up, let's do Captain Underpants. So I typed it in to just see if anybody else had done the same thing. Yeah, there's a whole series of somebody else has done Captain Underpants. So I started reading though, downloaded a book to start reading, think, that was a great idea. It's just gone,
Right. Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
always it's a
Yeah.
challenge as well, as you got to
Right.
find, but at the same time, 90% of the time your story is going to have a different feel to it. So,
Right. Years ago, I wanted to write children's books, and I did. I actually wrote quite a few, and I went to a writer's conference. I don't know if I shared this story with you in our previous conversations, but so I went to a writer's conference in Glorieta, New Mexico, and I took my samples, and the woman said, and this was really before self-publishing took off. And actually back then, if you self-published, you had a negative stigma.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember those days. Now everybody does it, and there's no more negative stigma, but that was back in those days. And so she was an agent and took her my stuff, and she said, these are good. She said, but nobody's going to buy them because you don't have a following. You're not a celebrity. You're not. And I don't know if you remember, there was that phase where it was just celebrity after celebrity after celebrity
Right.
was writing their children's books. And I was really thinking at the time, yeah, but are they writing the children's books, or is somebody else in there just anyhow, I'm sure that quite a few wrote their own, but she basically said, no, you need to write for women because women are the ones who buy books.
Right.
So anyhow, she was discouraging in kind of like your situation where you took the class from that publisher,
Yeah.
and he was like, yeah, look, we only do 12 a year, go do something else. So it was kind of the same thing. And now it's funny because before I even talked to you, I started thinking, where are my books? Because they were written on a computer like 3 or 4 generations
Right.
ago that I would have no access to that computer, but I know I printed them out. So I've kind of thought, I haven't really done anything with it, but I've thought about going through all of my boxes of papers and trying to find them and see, go back and read it, and is it terrible? Is it okay? Is it what? But so I kind of have that similar, yeah, they're okay, but, nobody's going to buy them. So anyhow, what were you going to say?
No, I just think it's always a question: is anybody going to buy your books? Are they good enough? How are you writing? And part of that is, I've been writing entertainment things since I was 11, but that doesn't mean they're any good. They're funny, they're skits, and they might be entertaining for each different level, but that doesn't mean they're good enough for a book and things. And I think what I've learned is, part of it is actually not everybody's going to like your book, so it doesn't matter to that extent. If somebody likes them, that's good. You've communicated your message, you've made them funny, or you've made them sad, or whatever it is. I was going on a writing course at the beginning of this process about 4 years ago, and one person in the course, they were set to critique your manuscript as part of it, and one person liked it and the other person didn't. And that's fine, so that's going to happen. So one agent doesn't like it, and that's part of my little picture book story is that, they might like the story, but they're too busy. They might not like the story. They like the pictures, but not the story, that kind of thing. And so one thing I've learned from even, using editors, which is part of the process, is that,
Mm-hmm.
each editor has a different bias, a different perspective, and that doesn't make it right or wrong. And as one of them said, we're not trying necessarily to rewrite your story. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to help you tell a better story. And
Right.
when you get past the feeling you're in class again or at school and you're getting graded,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
then you learn how to craft something that is perhaps more appealing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've had to learn is when I first started doing this 20 odd years ago, a picture book was typically about 1,000 words. And now they're saying, well, it should be less than 800. I find it difficult to write a story. I've just written one, the story, based with less than that. And even this very short story I wrote just recently, which is about still it's 450 words, and
Wow.
I've got one-liners on each page, so it's yeah, so
Wow.
it's difficult. That takes it as an art, and also one of the things you learn is just how much you want the illustrations to tell the story, how much you
Right.
add to the illustrations that actually have nothing directly to do with the words or the story, but they enhance it, but they're not really directly referenced. I mean, I don't know if you read Robert Munch books at all, but he was a very good at he'd have you'd have the story, and then you'd have these pictures, and in the pictures so much was going on. But as you just
Mm-hmm.
from a child's perspective, it's great to discuss this whole picture because it doesn't really directly reflect what's in the story. It's just lots of fun. Um,
Wow.
one,
Okay.
one of my the first book I did was called The Soxies, and one of my former colleagues' daughter, who's 15 at the time, she illustrated it beautifully, but she added in this cat. And the cat doesn't have anything to do with this. There's no reference to a cat in the story, but the cat really enhanced the pictures and just made it more funnier and more interesting from a child's perspective. And
Wow, interesting. So that your audience knows, I know this answer, but you do or do not illustrate your own books. I know you just talked
no,
about your
I don't.
friend's daughter doing it.
No.
Okay.
I don't illustrate my own books. That would not make them very. I'm just deciding I should write a story that just allows for stick pictures, stick figures, and then I could probably.
That'd be good. Yeah. Well, when I was looking into writing children's books, and again, I did write some. One of the things that I researched was if you're not an artist, it's okay. You usually the publisher, if you're going with a traditional publishing house, will find you that illustrator. So, but I know a lot of people are artists and they do both, and good for them. But I just wanted to make that clear that if you are not an artist, that does not mean you can't write children's books.
No, not at all. And I think that's, and I find it in some ways helpful to the creative process because you're having somebody else look at the story and pitch in with their
Mm,
stuff. And again, telling a little bit whether you're, my books, apart from the first one, I've had somebody in another company and they're hiring illustrators to do it, and they tend to do it towards your specifications. Whereas when you're writing with somebody who maybe has they're sharing in the royalties or whatever, they're coming up with different ideas, and or maybe they're making that extra little bit of effort to come up with something that makes it really enhances the picture because
hmm
they've got a vested interest in making it successful. That also means that you've got to say, well, is my writing good enough for their pictures? And that's the other side of
Right.
it. So someone would say, well, these pictures are fantastic. Can I write to that level to justify
Mm,
the level of these pictures? And that's a challenge, and that's where your sort of confidence has to come, be boosted, boost your own confidence and things.
right.
But I like it
Right.
if someone, again, from the Soxies, where Megan just added in the cat, and it really enhanced the whole thing. And
I love it.
right, yeah. So, but I think that's very important. There are lots of illustrators out there who are looking to write books, and I've found an organization that does them, and she has a sort of stable of 20 or so illustrators,
Okay.
and that makes it. And she does all, and Karen does all the design as well, and gets everything ready for publication as an ebook, a hard book, paperback, whatever you want to publish in, and that makes that a lot easier. And she also does a lot of courses and things on how to write and how to market and things like that. So it's a very good connection to have made.
I love it. Okay. Yeah, that sounds really handy to
Yeah.
have that connection of all of the different illustrators. Yeah, I love it.
And plus, we've got to, you when you're going to establish sort of relationship that you own the books, you're paying, and there isn't that issue about how do you do that as a collaborative effort. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot more. There's more work involved when you're trying to do this collaboratively with somebody, because you then got to, you're both jointly responsible for costs. You're jointly responsible for sharing the profits, and who does the marketing and all that kind of thing needs to be discussed. So that can take a little bit longer to get to that stage of an arrangement and finding a
Mm-hmm.
contract that works for everybody. I'm trying to do that with
Mm-hmm.
somebody I met in Italy, and it's not as easy a process. So
Oh, yeah. It doesn't sound like it, but at least this is a step toward helping the writer with the whole
yeah,
big picture.
yeah.
So, anyhow.
And
Okay, so
good.
go ahead.
Keep going.
I was going to I was going to say what's behind you. What is that
Oh, that's
representing?
my little picture books. That's
Love it.
the cover we did for Outstanding. No, not the cover. The last page. And I just thought, the whole attitude is hold on tight to your dreams, for communicating that to kids and things. And
Wow.
so,
I love that.
yeah.
And I love the concept behind that of, even though something is difficult, keep pushing for that dream of yours. That is a great message to give children.
So anyway, the character was illustrated. I absolutely love, adore the picture of the character and stuff. So, and he's got his own little dog, Pages, who follows him, goes with him on his journey. So I've now expanded all of him. So what he's going to do is going to travel to different countries and have adventures in those countries that hopefully showcase some of the cultural issues, some of the cultural facets of that country, or the
I
natural
like it.
natural facets that are entertaining enough for kids, and introduce things that kids would find fascinating. So, for example, in Italy, we're going to go to the Colosseum and do instead of a chariot race with horses, we're going to have a chariot race with dogs. So because his dog, so and make it entertaining for children, but at the same time, I thought, well, this is great. I get to travel.
Yeah, nice.
But I just couldn't leave this character because I think he's so wonderfully drawn and wonderfully just sitting there, just a
Mm-hmm.
one-off book. So I thought, man, this would be
Mm-hmm.
quite
Oh,
interesting.
sure.
Yeah, and again,
I
there are lots
love
of
it.
books out there that are to do with kids traveling in places, and I'm not again just doing a different facet, perhaps. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I love everything you've said. It's been a lot of information for anybody who's interested in writing children's books. You've given some good information. Is there anything else, any other tip that you would give the audience if they want to get into this or are
um,
already in it, but maybe leveling up? Anything that further advice, tips that you want to give the audience on writing children's books?
well, I think the thing that I've found is that, as I said, an idea can come from almost anything, but that doesn't mean that idea is immediately comes to fruition. And what I
Mm-hmm.
found sometimes is really useful is, I just put down the title, on the page, and
Mm-hmm.
I may not know how best to go about it, and then I'll maybe write one or two ideas of an outline of what I'm trying to do. If it's a series, what I'm trying to achieve with the series, and then maybe just leave it and go and work on something else, and then come back to
Mm-hmm.
it when the ideas have formed more readily, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see how you're going to get from the beginning through the whatever the adventure is, and then all the classic sort of process of a children's book, of a picture book,
Mm-hmm.
and again that I could get, maybe I'll write 3 pages and then again I'll have to leave it because I can't think of where next to go, and then come back.
Right.
Basically, I
Right.
tell my subconscious to work on the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's important, I find, that I keep my phone with me, because sometimes the ideas will hit me when I'm doing something like working out on the bike or something. And I think I got to document that right now, because if I don't, I'll forget it by the time I finish.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's an important
Yeah.
thing I've learned. Unfortunately, technology's improved, so you can speak into your phone. You can type into it or whatever. And so it's coming up and not getting stressed about that you can't finish the idea. I think that's the most
Mm,
important thing is, I mean, sometimes you just have to sit. I find I have to sit there and I really got to finish this to get to the end. That may not be the ultimate end of how the story's finished, but it's, you've got to craft an ending and then come back and visit it some other time and say, well, is that good enough? Is that better?
mm,
The other thing that I found also is that in terms of using something that's actually happened in real life, like we talked earlier about the divorce situation for my son and my daughter, but I was writing another story that was to do with what an incident that happened to me as a young child, and I thought, well, this is great because it's all in your imagination. You're imagining
mm,
the fear. You're feeling the fear.
mm,
You're imagining the worst situation because you're almost a 5-year-old. But
mm.
in reality, it didn't happen. So how do you try to convey something that really was in your mind the whole time? And so you still want to have a story, but it's, and I thought in the end, I don't think I can convey that as much in a picture book quite as much as actually saying,
Right.
okay, these characters were really, these bad guys were really there, and let's show them as were as trying, rather than trying to make them sort of imaginary characters. And so
Mm,
we had to sort of rethink that, and that helped with the editing process as well as trying to create a more impactful story. And so yeah, so it takes a while sometimes. Sometimes, I mean, I wrote a story recently about something happened here in our house apartment, and I wrote that in a very short period of time. And this is the very short one. I mean, it's funny. I think it's funny. We found it funny, but and it's that was much easier to write. I think partly because he just said, "Okay, let's take a situation, then just make it completely stupid and completely silly." That's, and I think the other thing I've learned a lot with this is, and it's reading other, the great children's writers, is that there's some of these things are a reflection of the times and settings they're in,
mm,
and so you can't always think that's great for now, but making things scary. Kids like they're happy to be scared as long as it's safe, scary.
right.
You are going to hit nerves for both the children and the parent sometimes. So that you have to, that's part of the communication. Your communication, the sadness, the stress, or whatever it happens to be. But I think it's just you have to keep working at it. And I take writing courses to keep trying to improve what I'm doing and how I see
Hmm.
it. I read a lot of other books, adult books, children's books, watch adult shows, children's shows, and then think about them, saying, well, this series, what are they doing throughout this series, and what makes it great, and how can you reflect some of that in your particularly if you're doing a series, for example, how do you reflect that in the whole series? So yeah,
Hmm.
it's a fun process. I think you have to accept the fact that marketing it is not going to be easy. Marketing is not easy. Does
Hmm.
take time, does take effort, and you have to keep telling yourself, "Yeah, you can do it again today. You can get up and do it again today." Yeah, I enjoy doing
Hmm.
this.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a business in that sense, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
every business you have to keep marketing, even when you're doing really well. I've seen that, just from a business standpoint. I've seen companies start doing really well and they slack off of their marketing, and then it shows up, months later.
yeah,
So it's just another business in terms of you've got to market every single day.
yeah. And I think a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine's younger brother, became a very successful adult novel, and he also said you got to look at how you maximize the different things like film and stuff. So he said, for example, he got a film rights with one of the major film studios, but they didn't do anything with it. So he
Mm,
didn't get the spin off from the benefit of having a
mm,
movie written about you. And so even though they paid him a lot of money up front, he didn't get the sales, he didn't get the level of interest, and
wow.
he wasn't, even though he's a bestseller in his own right, he's not getting the mega seller perhaps. So,
Right.
all the additional interest in subsequent books and things. So, It doesn't that so you have to look at different ways that you try to make success. So from my perspective, the marketing side of it was to say, okay, what can we do that makes a win-win here, that people will have a vested interest in keeping promoting your books,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. Probably isn't the same, is not that as relevant as how many promoting the books with a fundraiser aspect to it. So
Right.
you've got
Right.
other people doing a little bit of work on your behalf that helps in the
Right.
process. And,
Yeah.
and if any other authors decide they want to come and sell their books on that site, as well as anywhere else, that they also benefit from some of that work.
Mm,
Yeah,
I love it.
that is a major point, a major thing in this day and age. So
Okay.
this kind of podcast is fantastic from my perspective, getting out there
Good.
and
Good. Well, I'm glad you were able to come on. I know when I first brought it up, you were like, I said, no, it'll be good.
well, it's as I said, it's yeah. I mean, it's a new thing for mine, but that's part of what just our whole alignable web network
Right.
is part of as well. Is you're actually in front
Right.
of people on a regular basis, talking to people,
Mm-hmm.
learning what they're doing, explaining what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a
Yeah.
very good indirect marketing that helps
Mm-hmm.
you get used to it afterwards.
Yes.
And the other
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that I intend to do is get out there and go to schools and read my books to the schools,
Yes.
and because you'll get a fount of a whole bunch of ideas from kids as well. I mean, keeping in front of the
Mm-hmm.
children the age you're speaking to is important. All my kids have all grown up now, so I don't have that immediate source of silly things that are happening,
The
or
conversations about
conversations or comments and things that kids make.
smelly feet and all of that. So,
It doesn't happen. so
right. Yeah. Yeah.
so that's an important part of the communicating the stories to people, is actually reading them. And of course, when you read them out loud, which is part of the creation process, then you see, well, does it have a nice flow to it? Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you creating the atmosphere? I'm writing a ghost story from when I was around my prep school, and it's like, okay, am I creating the ghostly atmosphere that
Mm-hmm.
you think
Mm-hmm.
you feel, but can you actually communicate that well enough
Right.
in the writing?
Right.
And so
Right. And so one of the things, and I'm guessing you do this too, you were talking about editors are good or illustrators because they show you things that you haven't seen. That's when I was writing, whether it was stories or children's books or whatever. And I've had experience writing, but not necessarily books. So, you have several people read it, and then you do have those different perspectives from, you know, a mom this age, a dad this age, you know what I mean? Like just get a variety of people to look at it and read it and give you their thoughts. And some of them you think if, and some of them it's like, oh no, that's good.
yeah.
So anyhow, all right. Well, go ahead. What were you going to say
No,
before I
I haven't
close
actually,
this out?
as part of recent, I've been letting editors and read the books and things. I haven't given to friends because I don't have as many friends now, young kids, to say, okay, what do you think
Right.
of the story? Other than people who I'm dealing with who have young kids, like the illustrator or
Mm-hmm.
Karen and people like that. So,
Right.
but I think
Right.
it's good. And I think also, people ask questions you never even think about. I have one of my characters has changed his shape. And they said, well, how does she get to wear these clothes when she's not much bigger? And I thought, I've never changed. I've never, ever thought about that question. And I thought, well, do I need to answer that question in the book? And the answer I'd probably come out with is no. Nobody discusses ever questions how the Hulk keeps his shorts on. How do the Hulk's shorts grow? That he wasn't even wearing shorts, but suddenly he comes up with shorts, and how do they
Right.
grow to accommodate his massive size? Well, you
Right.
just accept that's a necessity as part of,
Right.
not having a
Right.
naked Hulk, but at the same time,
Right. Right.
so you just say, well, it happens. That's magic. That's fantasy. That's whatever.
It happens when he becomes the shirt's all hanging off, but the
Yeah.
shorts, man, they're there.
Yeah. Very good spandex.
There you go. There you go. Simon, I so appreciate you coming on, and we will put your information in the description. So we can put your website. People can go on and look at your books, maybe buy some books,
Yeah.
the ebooks, right? And any other things, any other links that you want to give, I'll put them in the description.
Sure.
And
Okay. Well, that's very
I
kind of you.
just thank you so much
Well, thank
for
you.
coming on and letting me talk you into coming on, because again, written story is communication. And so I just appreciate your time and your thoughts about how you write and, come up with the ideas, and then just also the back end of the business.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I will greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Enjoyed it
love
very
it.
much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Simon, thank you. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Traci. Bye bye.